Hello, how's the writing going? Today I thought about something really interesting to talk about. And if you want, it can inspire you too. How to write a book that inspires change, that becomes a force of change. I know it sounds a little presumptuous to think about a book that becomes a force of change, but really think about it. And when I started thinking about this, I thought about the books that had changed me in my life. I remember reading Atlas Shrugged as a teenager and being so inspired and motivated by that. Before that, there was To Kill a Mockingbird, and it changed my views about so many things. Then The Color Purple. And Jonathan Livingston Seagull, my all-time favorite book. I can really sit down and talk about it for hours. That book brought about a change in my way of thinking. Then there were so many other books after that too, thankfully for that. The Disowned Self by Nathaniel Branden, The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. All these books became a force of change in me. They made me think differently, act differently, and even perceive things differently. And change, if you look at it, change doesn't happen en masse at once. Change happens at the individual level first, and then it translates into an en masse movement. So a book has the biggest opportunity to do that, because it is something that when a person reads a book, they do it with full intention. Your mind doesn't wander in 10 different places when you read a book. Your mind is just there. And the author has you. The author's words will hold you. And that's what a book can do at that moment. It can initiate change, especially in expert books. Expert books are the biggest medium of creating change. And can they do that? Yes, they do that on and on. But there are authors that inspire us, that motivate us, whose thoughts become bywords that we live by. And how do authors do that? You see, by its very nature, writing, especially writing a book, forces an author to think with deeper clarity. You cannot write a book if you're ambiguous, if that idea is just floating in mid-air. Because when you start writing an idea like that, you will leave that book halfway. That book will never get completed. It's still, you are not completely convinced, and here the clarity of that idea will go down to the deepest level in you, is when you will write a book. So think about it. For a writer to write a book, a writer has to have very deep clarity. And that clarity is translated into black and white on paper. And so when a reader reads it, that is what attracts a reader. And in my experience of writing expert books, I think there are three main ways in which writers first develop that clarity, because it starts with the writer. It cannot start anywhere else, right? So how can a writer write a book that becomes a force of change? Well, I think there are three steps to that. Let me go into them one by one. The first thing I talk about most of the times is know your audience. What are your audience's struggle? What are their goals? What is their vision? What do they want to achieve, and what are they unable to achieve because of XYZ? And are you the person to teach them those XYZ, or can you teach them X1, not XYZ, but you can just teach them part of that X? What is it that you can teach them that can help them reach that vision, that goal that they are struggling to reach? So for that, you need to know your audience and what your audience's struggles are, what your audience's goals are. The second most important step in writing a book that initiates change is to be very clear on how you want them to feel. Now, why am I saying feel and not logic here? Because you can talk yourself blue in the face talking logic if you do not touch a person's emotions. That is the crux of what drives any human being. We might say we are creatures of logic. We might talk about ourselves as people who believe in reason and logic, but we are driven by emotion. So what is the emotion of your book? What is your book trying to achieve? What's your book trying to make your audience feel? Be very clear on that. Does your book want to make your audience feel empowered or inspired or motivated? And what does your book want to make the audience feel? What will the reader feel on reading your book, the certain chapters? What is it that you want to drive home? That point is driven home through emotions. Think about it. And when you start thinking on these two lines, the target audience, the emotions, your book's framework will start evolving. Well, and the third most important point about creating a book that initiates change, this is the point that people often take as the first point to talk about. It is, what will your reader do after reading the book? The hows, the steps, the things they have to do to implement a certain idea, a process. Most authors, when they start talking about their expertise, they just want to tell you the steps to their expertise. But that is what will be the last thing that will inspire your reader. First will be what you want them to feel, to understand that audience. Once you have cracked those first two things, the third thing is usually your expertise. And you know that. And you know that so well that you will talk about it. And then you also have to talk about how they will take the action and what they should do. Be very, very clear in that. Be as specific as you can in this. Because when you give people tools to think, to ideate, to develop themselves, they like those things being basic. Start with the basic first. Don't go beyond the basic in the first book, at least. Build your foundation and then move forward. These are my tips on creating a book that inspires. Tell me what you think about it. Bye-bye.